Hi, everyone. My name is Leann Parker, and I want to thank you for joining us today on Your Elevated Space, where we talk all about how to transform our spaces to improve our lives in the areas of money, relationships, and overall well-being. Over the course of 21 days, my guest and I are here to show you how you can gain happiness and clarity through intentional art and design. And today I am so excited to introduce you all to Kristen Boice. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is a speaker. She is a host of the Close the Chapter podcast. She is a mastermind behind the Close the Chapter curriculum, and she's here to talk all about why we tend to hold on to things longer than we should and how we can break that cycle. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Leann, for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I love your background. I love your work.
You are so sweet. Thank you for the compliment. That means a lot. So I know that you have a background in, you used to work for a Fortune 500 company, right?
I sure did. I worked there for over 10 years doing sports marketing.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So totally different profession. And here I am doing psychotherapy, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So I've been doing psychotherapy for over 15 years now. And that business background has really helped me with clients and propel clients in the direction they want to go, to close the chapter on what doesn't serve them, and then open the door to those possibilities, because people really get stuck. They feel stuck often in their lives. So here I am.
No, I love that. So it sounds like you've always sort of been in the health realm, but what made you decide really that it was time for you to transition into really working one-on-one with people and couples and, helping them to improve their lives?
It really started with my keen curiosity of people. Like, I always wonder about their stories. Why do they function the way they do? I was really intrigued in my own relationships that I were in. Like, why does he do that? And why do I do this? And so through that curiosity lens, through that really exploration of my own shadow sides of my own issues, started my love and passion and really following the leading of that curiosity to find out how people work. How do people make changes? Why do people get stuck? And so that really led me down this path that I wouldn't change for a minute. I absolutely love what I do.
That's amazing. So I want to start off by just simply normalizing what we're about to talk about, because, of course, in the era of social media and just the strive for perfection always, we just need to take a moment and understand that every single one of us struggles with some type of setback as it relates to our home. We just do. Even as designers, this is a true statement. So, if you're somebody who's here watching this and you're feeling like, oh, I really wish I could be better in this area, or I could stop doing this thing, or, I'm holding on to too much stuff and it's really overwhelming, you're definitely not alone. All of us go through that. So, I'm curious, Kristen, where does this all begin? I know you mentioned curiosity. So is that really where we can kind of just take a moment and just be curious about what's even going on?
The first step I start with clients is we take a deep breath, because we're so, especially when we're buying a house, remodeling a house, making any type of life transition, the anxiety can get heightened. We can get afraid. We can get really fearful. We're like, oh, is this the right decision? Am I making the right decision? And the first thing I do is we're going to stop and breathe. So I do this with everybody. I teach this with everybody. So I have people put their feet on the floor, and this may seem silly, but what happens is we immediately can start grounding ourselves and centering ourselves to get out of that fight, flight, or freeze response, that paralysis or analysis paralysis. And we can start connecting to what lies within to help get clarity on decisions, to help us go, okay, yeah, I didn't really, when I looked at that, my gut said, I got kind of a weird feeling in my gut, and I didn't really resonate with that. So the first thing we do is we feel our feet on the floor. We take a deep breath in through our nose. So we're going to practice together. In through our nose, we're going to inhale for 4. We're going to hold for 4. We're going to exhale for 8. We call this square breathing. Ton of research on this to calm our nervous systems down. So let's practice together. Inhale for 4. Hold. Exhale slowly out your mouth. do one more. And this may seem silly. I tell people to do this, a couple times an hour. So another deep breath in through your nose. We want to watch those shoulders drop. So we're releasing that tension and tightness. So this is really the first step. So when in doubt, breathe. Like we're all breathing, but we don't really get a good deep inhale. That helps us to go, okay, I can handle this. Because a lot of times we feel so overwhelmed, we shut down. So the second thing, curiosity and awareness. Like what is going on for me right now? What am I noticing? So I might be noticing, oh, my breath is really rapid, or, oh, I'm thinking about my to-do list and all the things I have to get done tomorrow. All those things, or, oh, I feel bad I didn't do XYZ for my kid, or the list goes on and on and on. And oftentimes what I call the shame voice, which is that I'm not good enough voice, or I'm afraid I'll make the bad decision and then what are people going to think? Or what are people going to think of this styled choice? Or what are people going to think of my house? And we spend a lot of time on that comparison and what people are going to think. So I tell people to watch the shame voice. It comes up ever so suddenly. We can be ready to make a choice, and then that shame voice comes up and says, well, who do you think you are? Why do you think you deserve that? Or it doesn't matter what that says, but it's there a lot of the time. Sometimes people call it the inner critic. And so when that comes up, I say, take a deep breath. Feel your feet on the floor. And say, it's okay. There are no shoulds. There are no shoulds, because we're like, I shouldn't do that. Well, I shouldn't choose that. I should choose that. And we get paralyzed. So if we can kind of go by the philosophy, there are no shoulds, I can feel my nervous system going, okay. You can change that language to could. I could get that item, or I could get this item. So it starts with one, breath. 2 is that awareness piece, noticing what's going on internally. 3, watching that shame voice that wants to take you out of the game and take you down the shame spiral, take you down into the dark abyss, take you down into analysis paralysis. And then the last piece of that is really saying it's no shoulds, and then it's okay. It's okay for me to make whatever decision I make. A lot of times we don't give ourselves permission to make a decision because of that fear that rises up of what people will think, or making the wrong decision. So then they don't make a decision. So we freeze. It's called fight, flight, or freeze. That's called being in freeze. And so we want to move through that. If we stay in freeze, that's why I tell people, go outside, take a quick walk for 10 minutes, move it. Otherwise, if we don't move it, you're going to stay stuck in it. You're going to call what I call looping. And it's just like a cat chasing its tail, and you cannot get clarity. So go out for a walk, play with your pet your cat, your dog, your bird, whatever you have. Go in nature. Whatever works for you. Try some things on, do that, write it out. And people are like, well, I don't want to journal. It's not journaling. Write out where you're stuck. And then go, what am I afraid of? Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? That's what holds us back. That is really deep, because the fear is the block to making a decision. The fear of what lies underneath, like, oh, making the wrong decision, what people will think, or what the future holds, that really holds us back. And when you can nurture the fear, you can move through it. When you can recognize its fear, you can start tending to it. It's when we're unconsciously sleepwalking. Have you ever been in your car and you have thought, oh my gosh, did I stop at that stop sign? Like, what, you don't remember even how you got home. Like, did I stop? That's going, like, we're sleepwalking. We're not present. We don't make decisions well when we're not present. When we're in the past, which is a lot of depression, or in the future, which is really anxiety, we're really not present to get clear on a decision. So I say, oh, you got to wake up. You got to take that breath, get back into the present to be able to get clarity of what to do next.
That's great. That's great. So I love that you've already touched upon, being in that moment where we're trying to make a decision and maybe, having challenges around that or hesitation. Can we talk a little bit about, a couple of topics that we've covered during the series are minimalism and organization. And we can tell people all day and every day that you just, there's things that you don't love, just get rid of it. But it's not that simple, right?
No, it's a pretty deep process for folks.
Can you speak to that a little bit
I would
more?
love to. I actually did a workshop for folks that were retiring and they were downsizing their house. And so this was a huge piece they asked me to talk on, like how do they, because here's the bottom line. With our stuff, we have attachments to our stuff. And the reason why we have attachments is because we have an emotional memory, a nostalgic feeling. And nostalgic means a longing for that feeling, a longing for. So if we go back to our childhood, think about an item you had as a kid. And it could be a doll, it could be a bike, it could be baseball, it could be baseball cards. I mean, for many different people, it's different. And immediately, if I pull that item out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember playing with that. Oh, and I can go back into the memory of that item and the feelings I had with that item. And so what happens is we want to resurrect this nostalgic feeling with this item. So we have an emotional attachment to the item. So if I go through someone's closet and I'm like, how about this? I'm like, oh, so-and-so gave that to me. That means so much to me. And I just, and they'll start telling me the story, right, of that item and why it means so much to them and what that has brought into their life. And then the fear of parting ways with it. So oftentimes people are like, ooh, I don't want to regret that I got rid of the item, or that feels like you're ripping a part of me out. Like people will say this, like, I feel like that's a part of me. And so this could be, especially if we have, this is where I'm going to say something pretty, like it's going to rock some people's boats, is if we have unprocessed trauma from the past. So a tragic loss, let's say it's a natural disaster. We have a loss of a parent or a loved one and it didn't get fully tended to and processed. We will want to hold on to those items because we're holding on to the memory of the loved one, or we're holding on to that. We want to be loyal to them and show our love for them. We want to honor them. There's a lot of meaning in that. And when we don't process through those feelings of grief, loss, sadness, anger, then what happens is we attach it to the item because our grief is equivalent to how much we loved somebody. So how deeply we are in pain over somebody is how much we loved them. So when we have the item of somebody that we haven't done that full grief work around, it feels so much deeper. And that's why you'll see a lot of people not be able to part ways, release those items. And so there's a process I recommend in going through that grief work in order to, for some of those folks that have unprocessed trauma, because the stuff is mirroring back to them the unhealed wounds. I know this is deep and I'm taking us deep, but
no, I love
sometimes
that.
this is an invitation for us to go, oh, there's pain here, and that pain needs nurtured, that pain needs tended to. And the item is just simply, it's not the item, but the attachment to the item, the meaning of the item, the emotions of the item is mirroring back to us, oh, I haven't dealt with this. I haven't really processed this. And what I find a lot of times is once we process it, we're able then to release the item because we realize it's not the item that really brings the memory. Because I can take pictures of the item. I can have memory. I can have that in my heart. It's not the item. Oh, I get it now. I'm able to release that. I can have a picture of it. I can hold a picture of it in my memory. And then I can be okay. And I can pay it forward to somebody else that might benefit from that piece. So I always look at, is there something underneath, maybe even from childhood? Is there something that didn't get processed around items? Or if you didn't have much in childhood, there's what's called attachment to items. So you'll see around 2 years old, kids, you know, mine. They like carry their blanket around. It's called like there's object relations. So they start to attach to that object, right? That's totally normal. That's appropriate. That's age appropriate. When we get to an adult and we're still going mine, probably there's some unprocessed stuff there. Probably there's some unprocessed stuff there. So let me give you an example. I had a case where there was a couple, and I started to share this with you before the call, and someone knocked on their door, knock, knock, knock. We'd like to buy your house. Oh, it's not for sale. Like, we're not selling our house. They're like, well, for the right price, make us an offer. So they made the right price offer. All of a sudden they're selling their house. So the wife is like, let's clear everything out. Let's get rid of all of it. This is just a bunch of junk we don't need. And I could see the husband's like anxiety just, she's like, minimalize, free yourself. You know, he's like, not that he was totally not on board with some of that, but you could see kind of the panic in his face. And he said, I have had cards, baseball cards that I've collected since I was a child. I've had memorabilia that's worth a lot of money. I've had this collection, you know, and he went on to say, and so we spent some time. I said, okay, first of all, take a deep breath. Because in that moment, he heard, you're going to have to get rid of all your items. Okay, no one's saying you have to get rid of all your items. Let's just slow it down a little bit. And so then I said to him, I said, he's like, well, I want to save this and give it, I want my kids to have it. I said, okay, you want your kids to have it. That makes sense. Let me ask you a question. I said, how would you feel if you gave your kids the items now and you got to see their response? You got to see how that was for them. And they may or may not want the items, PS, because sometimes we're like, thank you, I really don't want this item. But okay, so I said, and you get to give it to them rather than after you're gone, you don't get to experience that you gave them the item. What would that be like if you got to do that in real time? And he took a breath. He's like, yeah, I might be able to give some of the item. I might be able to part with a few of the items. And so you can see him start transitioning and going. Then he started to evaluate, okay, I could see that I could pay it forward now and get that experience now. And so he started to come on board a little bit. Then we talked about, what's your fear? I'm afraid I'll regret it. Like I said, that's one of the things. And I said, okay, let's explore that. He said, I'm afraid that I'll want those items back. And I said, usually, majority of the time I've helped people part ways with things, they don't want it back, which is fascinating because you would think that would be a bend. And I said, right, here's my invitation for you. I want you to take a picture of the item so you have it in case you needed it. And then I want you to imagine yourself going, is there any emotion attached to this item? And so this is where I go, and it's like, oh, I like, this brings me worth and value because I have this item and it's worth a lot. People think, wow, you've arrived. You really are somebody. So I'm like, oh, so it's really about what people think and how you find worth and value from that item. So as we deconstructed this, we started to get clear on what did the item represent for him. What did the item represent? Now, she's done a lot of her own work, so she could be like, get rid of it all. Because when we do our own work, we're not attached to the item. We're detaching from items. We're detaching from stuff. We're healing some of those inner child pieces that don't need the item anymore. Like at one point, we thought we needed that item. Now we're not. And I find when people get clear about releasing and detaching and unattaching from the item, clarity comes in their space and they're able to go, oh, I really love the color gray. And I just want a simple kind of, this is what I want. I don't need a lot of stuff. I just want it simple. And then they're able to enjoy their environment even more. So we have two people, one who's done a lot of work. She was ready to detach. She was ready to part ways. He wasn't so much because he wasn't where she was and nobody's right or wrong or good or bad. And when we can wake up and be open to what this is going on in us, we can start that process of grieving it and releasing it. We have to grieve the item. because it's not the item, it's the memory and the feeling attached to the item.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an important, really deep process for people, that they don't even know that that's a thing. They're like, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
That seems a little weird. I'm like, just sit, take a deep breath. You know, that we have the Maria, what is her name?
Kondo.
Kondo
Mm-hmm.
that says, does this bring you joy? And I'm going, yep. And is there more to explore emotionally that needs to be tended to around what this is mirroring back to you?
Mm.
Because you'll see people are like, no, I'm not going to get rid of that item. And it's like, oh, well, tell me about that. What emotionally do you have attached to that item? Well, that was my great grandmother's. And then they feel guilty. Like, if I get rid of this, my mom is going to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can't get
Mm-hmm.
rid of that. That's a family heirloom. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, so sit with that. Notice that. Yeah, I can't, they're going to be so mad at me if they come over to my house and they don't see Aunt, great grandma's, china cabinet, making this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You
That's
see how
okay.
then we feel like pressure to keep
Uh-huh.
an item because of guilt. And we like, well, if I don't want to be kicked out of the family system or someone's going to get mad at me, I'll just keep it. And heaven forbid I paint it or do something different with it. What were you going to say?
Well, I have to tell you, I don't know if she'll like that I bring this up, but I actually had a conversation with my sister about this very thing, and just yesterday. So how do we actually, let's say we're in a situation where we have a loved one who, has an emotional attachment to something and obviously wants to keep it in the family. And so, of course, their natural reaction would be, well, let me give this to someone that I love who will enjoy it just as much as I do. How do you handle those sort of situations, or is there a way?
I love it because this is so true, right?
It's very
And
real.
you said something that was really powerful, that I'm going to give it to someone that loves it just as much as I do. They think you're going to love it just as much as I do.
Right.
I'm going to keep my wedding dress and I'm going to give it to my daughter. And my daughter's like, I don't want your wedding dress.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where it gets hard. One, if you have an open system where you can go, hey, you can acknowledge, I know you want to keep this in the family.
Mm.
And talk to me a little bit about that. Tell me what this means to you. You can have a conversation around that. Explore why this is so important. Well, this is my great grand, or this is my mom's. And well, tell me about what this means. Like, what memory do you have about your mom's? They may or may not have a memory. They might just feel guilty and they're supposed to pass it on.
Mm.
If it's something you don't want, is that the question? Like, is it
I'm just
something you might not
sure.
want?
Let's say you're going through your own minimalist journey and, it's just a lot to take on someone else's stuff, but you also don't want to hurt someone's feelings, of course.
And this is tough because we may not be able to get out of it without hurting someone's feelings. So a lot
Okay.
of clients will say, I'm going to hold on to it until they die. Like, okay, that's an option, right? That's an
Mm-hmm,
option.
mm-hmm,
You can
mm-hmm.
keep it in your attic. You can keep it in a storage unit, whatever you want to do. That's an option. The other option is courage and vulnerability to say, I love you. I care. And tell me more about this item. And I don't want to hurt you because I know how this means to me, but I might not be the best person to pass this on to because I'm in the minimalist stage. I'm trying to unattach to stuff. I'm trying to let go of things. I'm at this different phase in my life. And I realize that might be painful for you. Yes. And I held on to that, yeah, I get that. I can acknowledge their feelings. I can acknowledge, because it's not about you. They're kind of
Mm-hmm.
projecting
Mm-hmm.
that onto you. And I'm not making anybody good, bad, right, wrong.
No.
I'm just going to hold space to say, I hear you. And I see this means a lot to you. And I might not be the best person to pass this down to because I'm really minimizing my life. I'm simplifying my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the tough one, because a lot of people have struggles with that guilt and even talking about feelings in
Mm-hmm.
general. So does that help answer the
It does.
question?
I think so. I think everyone wants to be heard and acknowledged, first and foremost, and for them to know that they're loved, of course. I think that's definitely helpful. One thing I was thinking about too is, maybe addressing the inner child, or maybe, our own self when we're looking, let's say we just feel more comfortable with a lot of stuff around us. You know, maybe we are stuck at a certain point in our lives. I feel like we kind of all are on some level. And then also, you know, the feeling of lack or scarcity. Can you address that and maybe how to overcome that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece because all of us feel stuck somewhere along the continuum in some area of our lives. And to have self-compassion is really hard for us because of that inner critic, because of that shame voice that wants to take us down. And so if stuff provides comfort, like that's kind of what I mean, some people find stuff is comforting. That usually is tied to something deeper. If someone doesn't want to do that work, okay, then that's their choice, and they're gonna have the stuff. And okay, my invitation is always exploration and curiosity without judgment. So if I'm like, well, why do you have all that stuff? Someone's going to shut down and feel judged and criticized and shamed. If I go, hey, tell me about your love for, you know, whatever it is, if whatever they feel like they're surrounding themselves with comfort in, I might explore that. And some people are pretty traumatized. So they're in a lot of times what that represents is self-protection. So if someone has had a lot of trauma or neglect on some level, the stuff represents like protection. Like no one can hurt me. I'm safe.
Yeah.
And so it really is deep. It really is deep.
I definitely felt that. I saw
that. Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. You just had an aha. That's what that was.
Yeah. I did.
Yeah.
Well, you brought something up that I found was so interesting, and you know, I just want to highlight there isn't anything wrong with having a lot of stuff around you, unless you're saying this is stressing me out or it's making you feel unhappy or uncomfortable, right? So to each their own, of course.
Yeah, but I do want to say something about having a lot of stuff and that protection, because that's what it really symbolizes, that I'm safe, that no one can hurt me. It's kind of like a wall of a hedge of protection. And I think trying that on for folks that do have a lot of stuff, I would invite them to say, could you be open just to this one question?
Okay.
Are you holding onto the stuff to protect you?
Right.
And what are you trying to be protected from? And I know that's a deep question. And that ties to a lot of unmet needs, potentially, and neglect and trauma. And so I just, and people may be too scared to do that, and that's okay, because there's too much trauma there. It's too scary to open that door. So they don't want to open that door. They'd rather just have the stuff and feel a sense of safety, even though it's not safe. Sometimes people are in environments, it's not safe. It's actually become very unsafe. And that represents something deeper that probably needs some exploration and intent nurturing. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, you know, let's say people are looking to make a change in their life. What do you, I'd love to talk about maybe, you know, constructive mindsets versus deconstructive mindsets, and really just kind of reformatting how we speak in our minds and, you know, speak out into the world and just getting started. How do we do that?
Absolutely. First of all, change is hard and scary. We have well-worn grooves that we've done since we were little to protect ourselves, to defend against things, to try to survive and thrive. And so change can be very scary. So I just want to say, I get that. So the first time people come into my office, they're like, I'm going to tell my stuff to a stranger, and this feels very anxiety producing. And I'm like, I got you. Take a deep breath. And so the first step to change is recognizing typically what will propel someone to change is it's so uncomfortable at this point. Like they feel so powerless, helpless, despair, hopeless. And so at that point, they're like, I want to make a change. That's one option. The other option is somebody just says, I'm ready. Like I'm ready. And then there's other folks that aren't so ready. They're just not there. So if someone is ready and wants to make a change, the first thing I have them write out is like, I want list, and be specific. An I want list. Because how many times do we explore what we really want? that was considered, we've got messages about that as a child, like, don't get a case of the gimmies. Don't think you're going to get that. Don't think, and it's not about stuff. I mean, that could certainly be on your list. It's about, what do you want? So I want a connected, deep, vulnerable relationship in my relationships. Okay. I want to have a connection and be a emotionally present and available mother. You know, these are the things. So making an I want list to start kind of getting you thinking about what changes you want to make and get some clarity around it. Be specific. People are like, I want to feel more supported. I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that means. Narrow it down, get more specific. So that really helps people start to kind of map out, what's the framework that you want to change? Because it can feel very overwhelming. And then I say, let's take it minute by minute. You know, we get people that are like, let's do this big goals. And they're like, I'm so overwhelmed. Like, I'm in shutdown. Like, I don't even know what you're saying anymore. I'm like, let's just take this bite-sized chunks. Let's just break this down. Let's just take it in small chunks, because if we go for the big, it's just too much for people's nervous systems. It's too much to think about a change. And what I say is, if you think about a child, you'll see them walk and then they fall down. They walk some more and they fall down. They skin their knee. They bump their head. I'm like, that's kind of like what change is. Then they start crawling again. And you're like, wait, I thought we were past this step. So sometimes you feel like you go backwards. Like, clients will come in, they're like, this is so much, I'm feeling worse than I was. I go, sometimes you have to feel like it has to be worse before it gets better. I love the analogy. Have you seen the movie Shawshank Redemption?
A long time ago.
Okay. It's an oldie but goodie. So basically he's, you know, in jail for doing something that he didn't do. So he has been dreaming about this, getting out from jail. Well, in order to get out from jail, to free himself, he has to go through the sewer. Okay. I don't know anybody that's like, let me go through the sewer to get to the other side where the light and the beach is. He had to go through the crap. He had to go through the sewer to get through. That's kind of what change is like. Sometimes we have to go through the sewer before we see the light. And I say, it's going to be bumpy. It's like riding a wave. I'm like, just keep going. A lot of people will quit. As soon as it gets uncomfortable, as soon as it gets painful, as soon as it gets hard, they're like, I'm out. And I'm like, it's like climbing a mountain. Keep going. Just keep going. Just breathe through it. Breathe through that discomfort. You got this. And then they're like, oh, okay, we did it. And then the next hard thing and the next emotion comes up and the next painful thing. And I'm like, just take a deep breath. You got this. But that's where we'll see people go back to old patterns. They like those predictable patterns because they're like, I know what's going to happen if I go back to what I was doing. And then after they get through those peaks and valleys, which is life in general, we'll always have those. I'm teaching them to tolerate and handle that and breathe through that so they can make sustainable change. That it's not temporary change. You know, people are like, I'm going to lose 50 pounds. And I'm like, whoa. Okay. And then they gain it all back. And I'm like, take a deep breath. Okay. Let's regroup. Let's see what was going on here. I'm really more concerned about the deeper dive rather than the surface. Because that's what pushes us to get stuck. So if I have unmet needs that I never got tended to, I'm going to be looking in all the places to get those needs met. And when I don't get them met, and I have unmet expectations, I get resentful and disappointment over and over and over. And I'm like, okay, we're going to meet our own needs. We're going to start healing those pieces. So change won't feel so scary. I always invite people to get support. Have a support system. Because otherwise you'll feel alone, like you're walking through the forest and no one can hear you. Right. I'm like, get the help, get support, whatever it looks like. And that's scary for people. I'm like, take a deep breath. Find your people. Find one person. I don't care who it is to help you along the journey. And you're going to help each other. So I invite people, if this does bring up stuff for you, if you're like, oh man, this just hit something for me. I'm like, okay, just notice that. And maybe call up a therapist, maybe talk to a friend, just pay attention to those signals. Because people get really afraid of that. They're like, I don't even want to look at that. I'm like, but it's knocking at your door for a reason.
It's true. It doesn't go away.
No, it manifests in other ways.
Uh-huh.
Continuously. And you're like, can we not have this keep coming up? Like some days I'm like, I'm tired of growing. No more growth opportunities. But I wouldn't change it at the same time.
I understand. That's the life of a business owner, isn't it?
Totally. Totally.
Those waves over and over.
Constantly. That's life. It's these waves.
No, it is.
It is super hard at times.
So when it comes to maintenance, obviously it's great to have accountability and having that support system. Is there anything else that you recommend, to really stay on track?
Yeah, there's lots of them, but I'll give you the highlights.
Okay.
So we have our support system. We have the breath. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. It's not a magic bullet. It's a huge part of the recipe. It's the first step in the recipe. It's feeling those feet on the floor, breathing through it. So that's something I recommend all the time. And if you have an Apple Watch, it tells you when to breathe. And I'm like, great. I have clients put their alarm on their phone every hour. I'm like, you can curse me out later, but to get them retrained to think about the breath, because we don't think about it. We're going at such a clipped rate. We got this and we got that. And so that's really important work. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. It's super important work. Movement. And I don't mean just as the physical body is able, even if it's sitting where you are, great. But it's movement, some form of movement, 10 minutes a day. So if you're in a bad mood, I'm like, go for a 10-minute walk. People are like, I am having a bad day. I am in a mood. Just leave me alone. Sometimes I say I'm not fit for consumption. Like, I'm like, ooh, it's not you. I've just had a bad day and I need 10 minutes. Go for a walk. Even if you walk up and down steps in your house, do it. Put a podcast on. Always listen to something that inspires you, that motivates you, that speaks to you. So if you hear somebody, you're like, I really like them. Listen, ingest that. So that becomes more front line. It's like taking a class in yourself. You're like, oh, okay, because we've got to help somebody keep us going. That's why people hire coaches and trainers and all kinds of stuff, because it helps keep them on track to continue to the work when we all want to quit. How many times do we want to quit? All this stuff. We're like, this is too much. I don't have time for this. Like, put on a podcast, listen to a book. Always if you have that thirst to learn and grow, follow it. Whatever it is, whatever interests you, follow it. I also recommend, I keep this with me. Okay, you'll see I have written in this. This is my journal. You can see it says I am enough. It's a reminder. And I recommend keeping one with you. Some people are afraid someone's going to read it. And there are some that they're like watermarks. So after you write in them, they disappear. Some people shred it because they just don't want to read their personal stuff. I'm like, I don't care what you do. You need to get it down. Because if we don't get it out, it sits in our nervous system in our body, whether we talk it out, move it out, or write it out. One of the three is essential. And some people are like, I don't know what to write. I go, okay, I want you to write about, what are you afraid of? What would you do if you weren't afraid? We've all heard that saying. What would you do if you weren't afraid? What do you notice that you want to change in your life? If you waved a magic wand and one thing would be different in your life, what would that be? One thing. I asked that in couples therapy. I'm like, and they each get to tell me. If you waved a magic wand and everything was better, what would be different? It's a great question. I love to hear it because the couples rarely tell me the same answer. So we get to find out, we get to explore. That's another writing prompt. So those are mainly, I'm giving you my top
Sure.
5 that I recommend. There's a lot more. Meditation, of course, mindfulness, where you're watching your thoughts instead of, we believe we are our thoughts. We believe that's true. And I'm like, that's the shame voice. That's not really. So, those tickers in Times Square? I'm like, watch your thought like it's a ticker in Times Square. Watch it float by and go, is that true? And your shame voice might go, that is so true. Your other part of yourself might be like, that is not true. That is really that is not my stuff. That's so-and-so stuff. Is that my stuff or is that my mom's stuff? Is that my stuff? Is that my dad's stuff? Not to blame parents, but Is that my stuff or is that my husband's stuff? Is that my wife's stuff? Is that my partner's stuff? Starts you getting clear on whose stuff is it. Why do I feel responsible for this?
Mm.
So that mindfulness helps us to have observation and perspective. That's why I love it. When we shift our perspective, we have a whole different way we saw a situation. Like, oh, I didn't even think about it like that. Oh, well, that isn't my stuff. Well, I did say this, but they said that. And what is my stuff? You start getting curious without judging it. We are our worst critics, aren't we? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We beat ourselves up. So writing it out gives you perspective over it. That's kind of a mindfulness exercise. That's why I like walking. It can be a mindfulness exercise. So I can be looking at the trees. I can look at, depending on where people live, different animals, different flowers. And then I can start going, okay, it gives me a different shift. Okay, that wasn't that situation. I'm okay. I can handle it. So many more suggestions, but those are my top ones.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, there's just so much to digest here. You are absolutely fantastic, Kristen. I can't say enough. I mean, you brought me to tears in front of everyone. So there's just really no other indication of greatness.
You felt your feelings. I'm all about feelings. So I'm like, you felt your feelings. That's really healthy. We're not told that. That's really healthy to feel feelings instead of pushing it down. So you got to model what that looks like, to it's like a wave, let it come up and then it settles back out.
It's powerful stuff. And I'll obviously encourage everyone to, even if you've been doing self-work, to just continue on that path, because there's just so much work to do. And it only improves your life. That's a fact.
I'll never stop. I'll always be a work in progress. And that it lights me up, because then I find hope, possibility in that. When we do some clearing of the layers, we're like, oh, there's my authentic self. Oh, I get to be me. Oh, I can stop pleasing, performing, perfecting, placating, pretending, all the P's. I get to be me. And at the end of the day, we still will have life's ups and downs.
Sure.
And if we can tolerate and we know how to nurture ourselves through it, we're like, okay, I can do this. Take each moment and each minute at a time. I can do this. I can handle this.
That's great. Well, tell everyone where they can find more of you, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that is now a big fan.
Oh, that's sweet. There's a free resource that if you do kind of go, I don't want to journal. I walk you through the breathing. I walk you through self-compassion. I walk you through some journal prompts to kind of get the ball rolling, to get you started on maybe some daily habits to nurture yourself. And it's at Kristen, Kristen, Boice, Boice.com. It's free. So you just put in your email address and it's free. You'll get that. And then Close the Chapter podcast. I have, I think, 67 episodes now on a lot of topics, from the inner child piece to trauma, anxiety, depression, couples, kids, parenting, you name it. So you can scroll through there and see, oh, this sounds interesting. And I have another take on the 5 love languages that's a little different. So you can just scroll through, pick the ones that resonate, discard the rest, and it's all no charge. So it's out there for everyone available, because my heart is to help people have hope and possibility and to be who they are, and close the chapter on stuff that they're just tired of them being tortured with, or tired of feeling stuck. And then Instagram, Kristen D. Boice, Facebook, Kristen D. Boice, and then Twitter, Kristen Boice. So if you want social media, you want to follow that, that's also an option.
That's great. And I will also link the giveaway in our Facebook group. So if you've been following along with us there, that's fantastic. And you'll have easy access. And thank you so much, Kristen. This was fantastic. And everyone, I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I did. And I want to encourage you to start implementing these principles, and definitely join Kristen's community, download her podcast. And for now, I will invite you to take a moment and jot the top 2 to 3 takeaways that you got from this discussion. And the first step that you can take to make a difference in your space and your life And be sure to join us tomorrow for our next expert discussion. And I look forward to seeing you then.